Economists use the term one-hoss sé depreciation to describe assets, such as a light bulb, that retain value until they suddenly fail. The phrase one-hoss sé comes from Oliver Wendell Holmes's poem The Deacon's Masterpiece, or The Wonderful One-Hoss Shay. A one-hoss shay, or a one-horse chaise, is a small carriage suitable for a single horse. In the poem, the deacon builds his shay with such balance that all the working parts are equally strong and equally weak. Exactly 100 years after its construction, the one-hoss shay suddenly collapses. James F. Fries, a medical professor at Stanford, coined the phrase the compression of morbidity as long ago as 1980. He argued for a radically different view of the human lifespan and of society, in which life is physically, emotionally, and intellectually vigorous until shortly before its close, when, like the marvellous one-hoss shay, everything comes apart at once and repair is impossible. So, a human one-hoss shay would die at the age of 100, having completed a marathon in record time the previous day. Fries' concept has been extraordinarily influential, not only within medicine but in society at large. For American baby boomers bombarded with images of jogging nonagenarians, the compression of morbidity has become an article of faith. Unfortunately, it is a belief which is largely unsupported by evidence. A review of the compression of morbidity by the US gerontologists Eileen Crimmins and Iram Beltran-Sanchez concluded, the compression of morbidity is a compelling idea. However, it may be as illusory as immortality. We do not appear to be moving to a world where we die without experiencing disease, loss of function, and disability. A 2017 British study on disability at the end of life found that on average men now spend 2.4 years and women 3 years with substantial care needs before death. The concept of compression of morbidity, however, seems to be immune to all these disobliging data. The American oncologist and bioethicist Zeke Emanuel outraged the baby boomers with his 2014 essay for The Atlantic called Why I Hope to Die at 75. He attacked what he called the American immortal. He wrote, I think this manic desperation to endlessly extend life is misguided and potentially destructive. For many reasons, 75 is a pretty good age to stop. Americans may live longer than their parents, but they are likely to be more incapacitated. Does that sound very desirable? Not to me. Biogerontology is the study of the biological mechanisms which control aging, with the ultimate aim of developing interventions to delay death. It is a rapidly expanding discipline with large amounts of both public and private funding. Typical private investors are Google founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page, who launched the biotechnology company Calico, whose aim is to devise interventions that enable people to lead longer and healthier lives. Although a variety of interventions, such as selective breeding, caloric restriction and certain drugs, have been successful in decelerating aging in some animals, there is as yet no evidence that such interventions work in humans. Nevertheless, there is a growing belief within biogerontology that effective interventions for humans will inevitably emerge, and judging by the growth in private investment in biogerontology, that belief is also shared by the market. David Gems, who is Professor of Biogerontology at University College London, has listed 3 possible goals of his discipline. First, compression of morbidity. Second, arrested aging. And third, decelerated aging. He admits that decelerated aging is the only goal which is likely to be achieved, but concedes that decelerated aging could well extend the years of disability and result in an expansion of morbidity. In this respect, he wrote, decelerated aging could prove to be a mixed blessing. He also conceded that we would be morally obligated to continue indefinitely, seeking ever greater decelerations of aging ever later postponements of illness, and greater extensions of lifespan. Unlike smallpox research, there is no endpoint. In 2018, the Nuffield Council on Bioethics produced a briefing note called The Search for a Treatment for Aging. The authors expressed concern that increased longevity might threaten the shape we envisage for our lives and our sense of personal identity. That access to aging interventions will be unequal, leading to an exacerbation of existing health inequalities, and that biogerontology promotes the medicalisation of aging. It suggests aging is a problem that requires fixing, and this reinforces negative views of aging. What are the consequences for society if average life expectancy rises to 100 or even more? We've already seen radical changes to pension provision as life expectancy increases and the birth rate, at least amongst Europeans, falls. The American science journalist Charles C. Mann wrote an essay for The Atlantic called The Coming Death Shortage, in which he envisaged a future tripartite society of the very old and very rich on top, beta testing each new treatment on themselves. Immediately below them, a mass of ordinary old, forced by insurance into supremely healthy habits, kept alive by medical entitlement. And at the bottom, the diminishingly influential young. Mann cited the case of Japan, where 1 in 3 men over the age of 65 is still in full-time employment, while 1 in 3 young adults is either unemployed or working part-time, leading lives of socially mandated fecklessness. I agree with Mann that ever-increasing longevity is bad for society, but the problem is this. Given the opportunity of a few extra years, would I take them? Of course I would. There's an old joke. Who wants to live to be 100? A guy who's 99. And this problem of the interests of the individual clashing with the interests of society runs right through modern medicine, from cancer treatments to assisted dying. The menu of options is increasing all the time and it all looks so attractive. What if powerful new therapies emerge which can decelerate the aging process and postpone death? Undoubtedly it will be the rich and powerful who will avail themselves. People in low-income countries will continue to struggle for simple necessities such as food, clean water, and basic health care. One particularly ghoulish trial provides an apt metaphor for the power basis of these interventions, the so-called Youngblood trial. Some years ago, a study in mice suggested that blood from young mice could have a rejuvenating effect in older mice. In 2016, an American startup biotech firm called Ambrosia began recruiting older volunteers who each paid $8,000 for the privilege of taking part in a trial of transfusion of plasma from young donors. Ambrosia has since closed. Some biogerontologists dismiss critics like me as life cycle traditionalists, who see aging as natural, necessary and healthy. And this view has also been labelled apologism by the historian Gerald Grumman. Apologism, he argued, is the antonym of meliorism and condemns any attempt by human action to alter earthly conditions. The biogerontologist Richard A. Miller has coined the word gerontologophobia, lamenting that the obstacles blocking the development of applied gerontology are now about 85% political and 15% scientific. Perhaps the greatest obstacle to decelerated aging is not public or political mistrust or the anti-meliorism of apologists, but species-specific biology. As the leading biogerontologist Suresh Ratan conceded, he wrote, "The major challenge is to translate the information gathered from studies performed on insects, nematodes and rodents to human beings." Medicine is now ruled by a very feeble philosophy that sees man as a machine, concerned only with material comfort and survival into extreme old age. This philosophy, as the great microbiologist and writer René Dubos observed, might be applied to ants and cows, but not to humans. We're made to struggle, to embrace dangers. We value some things beyond mere survival and comfort. Our faith in progress and that science will deliver it perpetuates the illusion that we can plan our society to maximize health and happiness. This faith is, in the unlikely phrase of Bertrand Russell, a form of cosmic impiety. We know we have despoiled the environment and suspect we will pay a heavy price. We know that human life, art, religion, spirituality, and love are based on the eternal verities of growing old and dying. Yet we now subscribe to the notion that we should struggle against these verities. Medicine no longer knows what it is for. Is the ultimate aim of medical research to eliminate all disease? If so, then we must be aiming too to make us immortal. Even if that were possible, which it isn't, are we quite sure that we want it? Does longevity trump all other considerations? Medicine and medical research in particular operates in an economic and moral vacuum. While we in the rich West spend vast sums on cancer treatments which often confer tiny incremental gains, people in low-income countries die from diseases that can be cheaply cured and prevented. They also die without access to morphine and basic palliative care. The 2017 Lancet Commission on alleviating the access abyss in palliative care and pain relief described how every year 61 million people are affected by severe health-related suffering, 80% of whom live in low and middle income countries. 45% of those dying every year experience severe suffering, including 2.5 million children. The editor of The Lancet, Richard Horton, wrote, "The deification of biomedicine as a discipline dedicated exclusively to survival has created an anti-humanist and quasi-theocratic science of health." Mankind has always yearned for utopias, but only in the 20th century did this yearning become medicalised. The concept of a new pill to delay aging is a variant of the magic bullet which has been the promise of modern biomedicine. During its golden age in the mid-20th century, medicine did indeed produce magic bullets against infectious diseases, but the diseases of old age and degeneration have proved resistant to this magic. We already know that simple lifestyle practices increase longevity and promote a healthier old age. These practices do not require technology and include mundane things like regular exercise, avoidance of alcohol and tobacco, a plant-based diet, and perhaps most importantly, meaningful social relationships. Even more important, however, is where you are born. In the UK, the gap in healthy life expectancy between people living in the most affluent areas and people living in the most deprived areas is 19 years for both men and women. Those living in the most deprived areas spend nearly a third of their lives in poor health. The anti-aging pill promised by biogerontology has, so far, turned out to be as elusive as the elixir of life sought by the ancients. Instead of pursuing a medicalised utopia, we might be happier, healthier and wiser if we focused our efforts on reducing social inequality. Ivan Illich took from Greek mythology the example of the brothers Prometheus and Epimetheus. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and for his hubris suffered the eternal punishment of having his liver pecked out every day by an eagle. Epimetheus allowed Pandora to open her box of plagues, but held on to hope. Illich called for the rebirth of an Epimethean man, whose guiding spirit is hope rather than the Promethean spirit of expectation. Promethean man expects to control his destiny and conquer nature, but Epimethean man stands before nature humble and creaturely. Thanks for listening.